You ever walk into a room and just feel someone's ego before they even open their mouth? That was exactly the vibe when I stepped into the courthouse in Pine Ridge County last spring. It was one of those small courtrooms where the walls echo every shuffle and sigh. And there she was, Meredith Lyle, self-appointed Queen of the Hillside HOA, perched at the plaintiff's table like she was presiding over a royal inquisition. Her nails were perfect, her papers were stacked like little legal monuments, and her eyes, man, her eyes said, "I've already won." She dragged me there to force me into obeying HOA rules from a neighborhood I didn't even live in. Yeah, you heard that right. I was being sued for violating community regulations in a community I never joined, never signed into, and never paid a dime to. But hey, details never stopped a power trip before. What Meredith didn't know was that in just under 3 minutes, I was going to end her whole delusion with a single piece of paper. But let me back up and tell you how we got here, because it didn't start with a courtroom. It started with a cabin. My cabin. I'd spent 15 years working as a back-end developer, saving every extra dollar I could. I never took fancy vacations, drove the same car for a decade, ate a lot of ramen so I could sock away money for something that actually mattered. Land, solitude, a place of my own, away from the noise and the neighbors and the rules about what color I could paint my front door. So when I finally found 5 acres of forested hillside on the edge of Hillside Oaks, just outside the HOA borders, I bought it on the spot. Paid cash. I built my cabin from scratch, a deep cedar green beauty with a wraparound porch and a gravel driveway. No street lamps, no lawn ornaments, no beige paint code in sight. It was everything I'd dreamed of. And I figured if I kept to myself, respected the boundary line, I'd be left alone. Turns out, I figured wrong. First time I met Meredith was a Tuesday morning. I was out back unloading bags of mulch when she showed up on the property line, clipboard in hand, tight little smirk on her face. "You the new owner?" she asked, though she already knew. "I am," I said, brushing dirt off my jeans. "Well," she sniffed, "I'm the HOA president of Hillside Oaks, and I'm afraid your cabin presents a bit of an issue." I raised an eyebrow. "An issue?" "Yes, the color, for starters. That green is not on our approved palette. And these trees," she gestured like she was swatting at mosquitoes, "they give off a rather wild appearance. And your gravel drive, that's definitely non-compliant." I let her finish her little monologue before calmly saying, "Ma'am, I don't live in Hillside Oaks. My deed clearly shows I'm outside your jurisdiction." For a second, she blinked like I'd slapped her with a fish. Then her smile returned, sickly sweet this time. "Well, we'll see about that." And that, friends, was my warning shot. I should have taken it more seriously. Over the next few weeks, it became clear Meredith wasn't going to let it go. She started sending letters, official-looking ones, with Hillside Oaks letterhead, warning me about violations and pending action. I ignored them because I had every legal right to. I didn't sign their bylaws, wasn't part of their HOA, never paid dues, and my plot had its own parcel number, registered outside their boundaries. But she kept escalating. Got her board cronies involved, Mr. Always Complaining Graham and Miss Garden Club Supreme Linda. They started showing up at the edge of my property, snapping photos like I was some kind of forest criminal. One night, a friend of mine who did live in Hillside Oaks called me, laughing. "Dude, you were the star of the HOA meeting. Meredith made a full slideshow about your place, used spooky music and everything." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. But the real kicker? Meredith found some dusty planning doc from 1998 that mentioned a future annexation zone that might one day include the Southern Ridge, where my land sat. Key word, might. It was never finalized, voted on, or registered, just a hypothetical. But to her, it was divine scripture. She started claiming my cabin was in Hillside Oaks by proximity, that the HOA had a moral responsibility to maintain visual consistency even beyond current borders. Her words, not mine. So, when I didn't comply with her fantasy rules, she sued me. 23 pages of legal gibberish, filed with the local court, served by a poor guy who looked more embarrassed than I did. Her lawsuit demanded that I repaint my house to approved neutral tones, trim any trees over 12 feet, pave my driveway with HOA-certified materials, and, get this, pay 5 years of back dues, totaling just over $34,000. I could have freaked out, could have hired a $300 an hour lawyer, but instead, I picked up the phone and called the county records office. A week later, I had what I needed, a certified plat map and legal documentation that made everything crystal clear. Which brings us back to the courtroom. Meredith showed up looking like she was running for Congress. Gray power suit, pearl necklace, 2 rolling briefcases of color-coded binders. She even brought foam board exhibits like we were on Judge Judy. I swear she rehearsed every word of her statement in front of a mirror. When the judge, an older woman named Justice Harlan, called our case, Meredith practically leapt to her feet. "Your Honor," she began, "this man is flagrantly violating community guidelines that preserve our property values. His non-compliant home is a visible blight on our carefully maintained neighborhood." She spoke like she was giving a TED Talk, quoted bylaws, referenced future expansion plans, and finished it all with dramatic sighs and finger-wagging about community standards. Then it was my turn. I didn't speak much. I just pulled out 1 sheet of paper, the certified county record, and handed it to the judge. She adjusted her glasses, read for about 30 seconds, then looked up and asked Meredith, "Did you read this?" Meredith squinted. I don't think I've seen that document." "Well," the judge said, tapping it gently, "you should have. This proves beyond any doubt that Mr. Brooks's parcel was legally subdivided in 1997, 1 year before Hillside Oaks HOA was established, and is not, nor has it ever been, under your HOA's jurisdiction." You could hear a pin drop. Meredith's face lost all color. Her fingers stopped their nervous tapping. That smug little smirk melted off her face like ice cream in a July truck bed. Then Judge Harlan went in. She called the lawsuit frivolous, said it bordered on harassment, and warned Meredith that using legal resources to intimidate someone outside her authority was a serious misuse of the court's time. She ruled entirely in my favor, ordered the HOA to pay my legal costs, $4,800, and issued a formal cease and desist, prohibiting any member of the HOA from contacting me or interfering with my property again. And then, just for good measure, she suggested that the Hillside Oaks board reconsider whether Miss Lyle is fit to continue serving as president. That was the moment, right there, when everything cracked. Meredith tried to speak, maybe mumble something about an appeal, but the judge banged her gavel and said, "Dismissed, with prejudice," meaning she could never sue me for this again. Word spread fast, faster than I expected. By that evening, Hillside Oaks had called an emergency board meeting. Meredith was voted out, unanimously. Even Graham and Linda turned on her. But that wasn't the end of it. See, Meredith was a real estate broker for a mid-tier firm in town. News of her little courtroom stunt got back to her managing broker by Monday. Apparently, trying to illegally impose HOA rules on non-members is frowned upon in the real estate world. Who knew? She got placed on indefinite suspension, and from what I heard, she was being reviewed by the state licensing board. She could lose her license, pay fines, maybe even face civil penalties. That Friday evening, I drove past the Hillside Oaks clubhouse. Her SUV was in the lot. Through the window, I saw her inside, alone, surrounded by boxes of papers she probably thought would win her the case. Her shoulders were slumped, her face buried in her hands. And I'll be honest, for a split second, I felt bad for her. But only for a second. Sometimes people need to be reminded that power doesn't mean ownership. That rules don't travel across property lines just because you're uncomfortable with how someone else lives. So, if you're ever up against a bully hiding behind bylaws, stand your ground. Know your boundaries. Sometimes, all it takes is one quiet page of truth to silence a mountain of noise. And if you've ever had an HOA horror story or a Karen in your life who tried to control something that wasn't theirs, drop it in the comments. I want to hear it all. Let's talk about community, control, and what real ownership actually means. And hey, if you liked this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life drama.